There's an old saying that when one door closes, another opens. Elvis Presley discovered the truth of those words on December 4th, 1975, when his car breakdown led him to 37 children who needed exactly what he had to give. This is a story about second chances, unexpected blessings, and how sometimes the most important moments in our lives come disguised as ordinary troubles. If stories about kindness and the unexpected ways God works in our lives touch your heart, please subscribe to our channel. We share true stories that remind us of the goodness that still exists in this world. December 1975 was a different world. Gas costs 59 cents a gallon. Families still gathered around the dinner table every night, and when your car broke down, people actually stopped to help. It was in this simpler time that Elvis Presley found himself driving alone through the back roads of Tennessee, trying to clear his head after a difficult period in his life. Elvis was struggling. The pressures of fame, prescription medications, and a recent divorce had left him questioning everything. At 40 years old, he felt older than his years and wondered if he'd lost touch with the values his mother Gladys had taught him about helping others and staying humble. That particular December afternoon, Elvis was driving his 1975 Cadillac Eldorado from Memphis to Nashville, taking the scenic route through small towns because he needed time to think. He'd been having what folks today might call a midlife crisis, but back then people just called it going through a rough patch. About 60 miles outside of Memphis, in the small town of Whiteville, Tennessee, sat St. Mary's Children's Home. It had been operating since 1923, caring for orphaned and abandoned children from across the region. The home was run by Sister Margaret Catherine, a woman who dedicated her life to giving these children love, discipline, and hope for the future. In December 1975, 37 children called St. Mary's home. They ranged in age from 4 to 17, each with their own story of loss and longing. Some had lost parents to illness, others to accidents, and a few had simply been left behind by families who couldn't care for them. Sister Margaret did her best with limited resources. The state provided basic funding, and the local community helped when they could, but Christmas was always challenging. How do you make 37 children feel special and loved when your budget can barely cover necessities? The children had learned not to expect much. They were grateful for what they had: warm beds, regular meals, and adults who cared about them. But like all children, they dreamed of something more. They dreamed of families, of Christmas mornings with presents under a tree, of feeling truly wanted. As Elvis drove past St. Mary's that December afternoon, his Cadillac began making a terrible grinding noise. Black smoke started pouring from under the hood, and the engine died completely. He managed to coast into the orphanage's circular driveway before the car gave up entirely. Elvis sat there for a moment, frustrated and tired. This was exactly the kind of problem he didn't need. But as he got out of the car to assess the damage, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks: the sound of children singing. Through the windows of the main building, he could see a group of children practicing Christmas carols. Their voices were pure and sweet, filling the December air with Silent Night. For the first time in months, Elvis smiled genuinely. Sister Margaret heard the commotion and came outside to investigate. She was a practical woman in her 60s who'd seen everything in her 30 years of caring for children. But when she saw Elvis Presley standing next to his broken-down Cadillac in her driveway, even she was speechless. "Excuse me, sister," Elvis said, removing his sunglasses and speaking with the respectful tone his mother had taught him to use with people of faith. "I'm terribly sorry to bother you, but my car seems to have given up the ghost. Would it be possible to use your telephone to call for assistance?" Sister Margaret recognized him immediately, of course, but she was more impressed by his politeness than his celebrity. "Certainly, Mr. Presley. Please come inside. The children are practicing for our Christmas program. I hope the noise won't bother you." "Ma'am, that's the most beautiful sound I've heard in a long time," Elvis replied. When Elvis walked into St. Mary's, he entered a world he'd almost forgotten existed. The building was old, but spotlessly clean. Religious artwork hung on the walls alongside children's drawings and school papers. The smell of dinner cooking drifted from the kitchen, and everything spoke of a place where people truly cared for one another. The children's choir director, Mrs. Helen Roberts, was leading the practice when she noticed their unexpected visitor. The children turned to see what had captured her attention, and 37 pairs of young eyes went wide with amazement.
"Children," Sister Margaret said calmly, "we have a guest who needs to use our telephone. Please continue with your practice." But the children couldn't concentrate. Whispers rippled through the group. "Is that really Elvis? What's he doing here? Should we ask for his autograph?" Elvis, meanwhile, was calling his mechanic in Memphis. The news wasn't good. It would take several hours for help to arrive, and with the approaching winter darkness, it might be better to wait until morning. When Elvis explained his situation to Sister Margaret, she didn't hesitate. "Mr. Presley, you're welcome to stay for dinner and spend the night. We have a guest room, and it would be our pleasure to have you." Elvis was touched by the offer, but concerned about imposing. "Sister, I appreciate the kindness, but I don't want to disrupt your routine or upset the children." "Mr. Presley," she said with a knowing smile, "these children have very little excitement in their lives. Your presence here might just be the early Christmas gift they need." At dinner that evening, Elvis sat at one of the long tables with a group of 8 children. The initial shyness quickly gave way to curiosity, and soon the children were asking him everything from, "Are you really famous?" to, "Do you know Santa Claus?" 10-year-old Sarah, who'd been at St. Mary's for 3 years after losing her parents in a car accident, asked the question that touched Elvis most deeply. "Mr. Elvis, do you have any children?" "I have a daughter named Lisa Marie," Elvis answered. "She's about your age." "Does she live with you?" asked 12-year-old Michael, whose father had abandoned him when his mother died. Elvis paused, thinking about his complicated custody arrangement. "Sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. But I love her very much, and I try to be the best father I can be." The honesty in his answer seemed to resonate with the children, who understood complicated family situations all too well. After dinner, Mrs. Roberts invited Elvis to listen to the Christmas program the children had been preparing. They performed Silent Night, O Holy Night, and the Christmas song, with voices that were untrained but filled with genuine emotion. When they finished, Elvis applauded warmly. "That was wonderful. You know, I started singing in church when I was your age. Music has been the greatest blessing in my life." 8-year-old Tommy, who rarely spoke to adults, raised his hand shyly. "Mr. Elvis, would you sing something for us?" Elvis looked around the room at 37 hopeful faces. "I don't have my guitar with me, son." "Mrs. Roberts has a piano," offered 15-year-old Maria. "She teaches us sometimes." What happened next became the stuff of legend at St. Mary's. Elvis sat down at the old upright piano and began playing Love Me Tender. His voice, without microphones or amplification, filled the small room with warmth and emotion. The children sat mesmerized. This wasn't the Elvis they'd seen on television or heard on the radio. This was a man sharing his gift in the most intimate setting possible, singing as if each child was his own. He followed with Can't Help Falling in Love, and by the end, several children were singing along. Then he surprised everyone by playing How Great Thou Art, the gospel song that had always been close to his heart. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Elvis sat with Sister Margaret in her small office, drinking coffee and talking about life. She told him about the challenges of running the orphanage, the children's stories, and her hopes for their futures. "These children have been through so much," she said. "They're resilient, but they long for someone to truly believe in them. Sometimes I wish I could give them more than just the basics." Elvis listened carefully, thinking about his own privileged daughter and the opportunity she had that these children would never know. "Sister, what do these children need most?" "Hope," she answered without hesitation. "They need to believe that someone cares about their dreams and that their futures can be bright." That night, alone in the guest room, Elvis couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the children's voices during their choir practice, their eager faces during dinner, and the way they'd hung on every word of his impromptu concert. By morning, Elvis had made a decision that would change 37 young lives forever.
When Elvis appeared at breakfast, he seemed different, more energetic and purposeful than he'd been in months. After the morning meal, he asked Sister Margaret to gather all the children in the main room. "Yesterday, my car broke down, and I thought it was just bad luck," Elvis began, looking at each child. "But I've realized that sometimes what seems like a problem is actually a blessing in disguise. Meeting all of you has reminded me of something important, that we're all part of one big family, and families take care of each other." He paused, watching their attentive faces. "Sister Margaret tells me you're all working hard in school and helping around here. I'm proud of you for that, and I want to make sure you have everything you need to succeed." What Elvis announced next left everyone speechless. He was establishing a scholarship fund that would pay for college education for every child at St. Mary's who maintained good grades and graduated from high school. Additionally, he was providing immediate funding for new musical instruments, sports equipment, and educational materials. But the most important part wasn't the money, it was the commitment. Elvis promised to visit regularly, to be personally involved in their lives, and to make sure they knew someone believed in their potential. The children's reactions were a mixture of joy, disbelief, and overwhelming gratitude. Several of the older ones began crying, understanding perhaps better than the younger children what this opportunity meant. 17-year-old Robert, who'd been planning to get a factory job after high school because college seemed impossible, asked quietly, "Mr. Presley, do you really mean this? Are you really going to help us go to college?" "Son," Elvis replied, "I give you my word. And where I come from, a man's word is his bond." True to his promise, Elvis visited St. Mary's regularly over the next 2 years. He attended their Christmas programs, graduation ceremonies, and even some of their regular dinners. The children grew comfortable with him, and he with them. He brought his daughter Lisa Marie to visit several times, teaching her the same lessons about helping others that his mother had taught him. The children at St. Mary's became like extended family to both of them. When Elvis passed away in August 1977, the scholarship fund he'd established continued through his estate. By that time, several of the older children had already begun college with his support. Over the years, the Elvis Presley St. Mary's Scholarship helped 37 children achieve their dreams. They became teachers, doctors, social workers, musicians, and business owners. More importantly, they became adults who understood the power of giving back. Many of the St. Mary's children went on to establish their own charitable programs. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the little girl who'd asked about Lisa Marie, became a pediatrician and opened a free clinic for underprivileged children. Michael Thompson became a social worker specializing in foster care and adoption. Tommy, the shy 8-year-old who'd asked Elvis to sing, grew up to become a music teacher who established youth choirs in low-income communities across Tennessee. Sister Margaret, who lived to be 93, often reflected on that December day when Elvis's car broke down. "That breakdown was the best thing that ever happened to St. Mary's," she would say, "but more than that, I think it saved Elvis too. He'd lost his way, and finding us helped him find himself again." Elvis himself said something similar in one of his last interviews. "Those children taught me that success isn't about how many records you sell or how famous you become. It's about how many lives you touch and how much love you give." Today, a plaque in the main hall of St. Mary's Children's Home, which still operates, reads, "In memory of Elvis Presley, who proved that angels sometimes arrive in broken-down Cadillacs. December 4th, 1975. A day that changed 37 lives forever." But perhaps the most fitting tribute is the annual Elvis Presley Day at St. Mary's, when current residents perform the same Christmas songs that captivated Elvis that December evening. Mrs. Roberts, now in her 80s, still leads the choir, and she always ends the program with the same words. "Children, remember that you never know when an ordinary day might become extraordinary, and you never know when you might be the angel someone else needs." This story reminds us that sometimes our greatest trials lead to our greatest blessings. Elvis thought his car breakdown was a disaster, but it led him to one of the most meaningful experiences of his life. The children thought they were just ordinary orphans that nobody wanted, but they became the inspiration for one man's renewed sense of purpose and the recipients of opportunities they'd never dreamed possible. And Sister Margaret thought she was just offering shelter to a stranded traveler, but she was actually